is Ann Bronston, and I'm a proud member of City Garage Theater. City Garage introduced me to a unique vision of theater. Their plays challenge form and confront political ideology with a vivid theatrical style. The imagery in the language and in the staging is at once beautiful and frightening, dreamlike and often nightmarish. I learned so much from working with City Garage. I was deeply flattered when Frédéric invited me to share my short stories, and I am thankful to the members of City Garage for lending their talents to reading them. City Garage is a unique and wonderful and important voice in world theater. Please support City Garage. Thank you.
Here's what this is about. Mud and scotch and stupidity. Lots of stupidity. And Cora Moon. Cora Caramel. Cora Naked. It was a rainy Thursday evening. I drove Janie to the airport to catch a flight to New York to go see her mom, or that's what she told me. We'd been married 4 years, and I'd been holding back that nagging feeling that the changes marriage brought to my life were not necessarily the ones that I wanted. Janie's world was corporate and rich. I lived my life in trailer homes, JD facilities, and on the road chasing the rodeo. Lately, I noticed how at the parties we went to, she didn't always introduce me to people. When I pulled the luggage out from the car, we kissed. The rain made it easy not to have to say I love you or any of the things that the not saying means more than the saying. Home. I poured a drink. Scotch was smooth. Not like the stuff I used to drink when I was rodeoing. Stuff I'd pour my beer first thing in the morning, get my sore and bruised body moving. Then again at night to get it not moving. When a bronc broke 3 of my ribs and puncturing my kidney, it was time to walk away. Land was cheap in Florida and warm air is easier than cold on a limb. I took my horses east. Janie called when she arrived in New York. Hi, I'm safe and sound. Scotch bottle was near empty. Hearing a voice, I remembered the body I couldn't see. You know, the one, not the one with the tight raised shoulders and lips and a downward pull, but the soft, slim, loose-gated one. Janie just a few years ago. I didn't say anything back to her. I held the phone tight. I listened to her breathe. She's a smart lawyer, and she holds her own when it comes to silences. Finally, I said, I guess it's good. You're safe and sound. That's all I said. And I hung up. That's about where we were in our marriage. Unspoken words. Each of us primed to hurt or to be hurt. Phone rang again. I didn't pick up. 5 years ago, I met her in a bar. You could not notice her. She was that beautiful. Her hair was dark and her skin was cream white. It was her skin I fell for first. There was a stillness to it. You'd feel almost sleepy looking at it. She'd had a drink or two too many. I'm Janie. Oh, I told her my name and ordered her a beer. What do you do? She asked. Well, used to rodeo mostly. Oh God, I love Tampa. Circus people, rodeo cowboys. It's surreal. Oh yeah, she took a drink of beer. I watched her head arch backward. I wanted to run my hand over the taut skin of her neck. I'm new to Florida from New York. Came in August. God, it was hot. Now it's perfect. I always love March anywhere I am. So, you used to ride the bucking broncs? Broncs mostly. Some roping, but the money's with the broncs. Oh, poor horses. Well, it's kind of cruel, don't you think? Oh, poor cowboys, I'd say. An unbroken horse is an unbroken horse. They're money horses. They get well taken care of. Well, what do you do now? Oh, not much of anything. Take care of the horses, mend my body. Sounds kind of boring. I hadn't thought of it that way. Her drink was finished. What do you do with your adventure-filled life, Miss Janie? Oh, I'm a lawyer. Sounds kind of boring. It is sometimes. But it pays lots of money. She didn't say anything else. I took her arm and said, let's get some food. You can pay, you're so rich. Janie and I made love that first night. I was living in a trailer that smelled of stale beer and old dog. Before she was even inside, she started taking her shirt off. I let my hand touch her neck. Skin soft as silence, like snow. I never touched a woman so beautiful. Oh, not just that. She was smart and direct. Funny in a way that I hadn't known before. We crossed borders with each other. A couple of years into our marriage, Cora came to my door. She was 14, creamy caramel colored. In Tampa, you get middle-class whites, rich whites, cracker white. You see blacks and Hispanics, Seminoles sometimes. Cora was a mix of every minority breed, except maybe Asians. She had a Seminole, Hispanic. She even had Creole from a Louisiana grandma. She asked if she could ride my horses, and she'd sweep up the stalls for me. Thought I'd give her a chance. She followed me to the barn. I took her to Tree's stall. She's a tall horse, part Arabian. She put her hand on Tree's muzzle, and speaking gently, she moved her hand down her neck, close to the mane. Well, that's the language of horses. It's body to body. You just press a thigh into their belly and they'll run for you. Well, she put the lead on Tree and took her out of the stall. I saddled Tree and handed Cora the bridle. It says, well, you know how to bridle a horse, I said. Oh. She looked at it a moment and then said, I don't need a bridle. I'm part Seminole. It's Native American. It's Plains Indians that ride. Seminoles wrestle alligators, I said. All Native Americans ride. Well, that's bullshit about Seminoles. What's your name? In case I have to call an ambulance. She got on Tree using an old mountain stand. I got on, drove her, and pulled him up next to Tree, and we started out. Now, don't lean on her neck. You keep your legs loose. I thought you said you knew how to ride. Cora had Tree's mane twisted into one hand and the lead in the other. I kept us at walk. When it was time to turn back, I brought Drover around at an angle so as to block Tree and keep her from, running back to the barn. But before Cora could turn Tree around, her legs caught Tree in the belly. I kicked Drover, keeping a wide space between the horses so Tree wouldn't feel we were racing her. Cora was lying on Tree's neck, her legs closed tight around Tree. When I was finally able to cut Tree off, strands of foam were pouring off Drover. Cora's tightened jaw and her held her face in this weird grimace. Her hands were trembling. Get the fuck off that horse. She just looked at me. Her legs were locked. I'm holding the horse. You're okay. She kept staring at me. Slowly, she loosened her grip, one leg at a time, and dismounted. I pushed past her, got on a tree, and led Drover back, leaving Cora behind. Well, when Cora did finally get back to the stable, she said, I told you I could ride. I don't know what you could do, you or what you can't do, but you're not doing it here. Good or lucky, you're a stupid rider. I don't want stupid people around my horses. She just looked at me as though I said it was a warm day. Oh, what are you waiting for? Get out of here. Okay, she says, but I'll come back real soon. Bye. A few months later, Cora was at my door with a bottle of tequila. Well, if it isn't Cora, where'd you get that tequila? At a liquor store. You don't even look 13. She just shrugged her shoulders. Gave her Dunstan to ride. Saddle, he's old and gentle. She took Dunstan out the same easy way. When I gave her the bridle, she just looked at it, trying to figure out what strap went where. You don't know how to ride horses, do you? I know to stay on. That's riding, isn't it? That's how it started with Cora. Phone rang again. I pulled the cord from the jack. I was dizzy from the scotch. I could taste the jealousy in my mouth, gritty and bitter like the dust on your tongue after you've been thrown quick. I never cheated on Jane. I never wanted to. But I believed she was cheating on me. I stood in the doorway of the house. Rain had stopped, but you could still feel the weight of the thunderclouds. Having a house let me pretend that I'd won the six-figure purses, retired smoking Cubans, and given the occasional interview. I'd won some big ones, enough to let me keep my horses and own this land, but it's Janie's money that built the house. I watched far-off flickers of lightning and saw Cora bareback on Drover. Small shadow of gold moved through the darkening evening sky. At 16, Cora had a different body. I'd never witnessed that before. How a girl's body changes. It surprises. Soon Cora had ridden Drover up to the house. I know she's not home. Ride with me. She says, her voice was no longer that of a 16-year-old. It was lower and purrs at me. Then she began to take her t-shirt, pull her t-shirt over her head. I was woozy from drinking and for a moment unsure what Cora was doing. I felt sorry for her. I've also felt the humiliation of not knowing the measure of your own behavior. Put your shirt back on. He struggled to fit back into it. Hardly made a difference. Go home or we'll both be embarrassed tomorrow. Though I knew there could never be a tomorrow for Cora Moon here anymore. But we both wanted to escape a speed. The horses galloped, kicking up clumps of mud, and the land turned swampy. Their hooves sank and drove her stop dead. Cora sailed over to the ground. I lifted Cora from the mud. She's laughing. And I took off my shirt and I wiped the mud from her face. We both recognized what was about to happen. Her skin wasn't like narcotic, like Janie's. It was new, harder, and firmer. I stabled the horses, not bothering to clean them up. In the bedroom, I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see her face. My throat was tight and dried out. I knew what shame felt like. I told myself I deserved Cora because she wanted me so bad, because there aren't many great pleasures in life, and Cora's body is one of them. By the afternoon of the next day, Janie's standing in the bedroom door. You stupid shit-kicking fuck. How long have you two been fucking? She was crying. I was so worried about you. I couldn't reach you. She crumbled into her chair. I felt lonelier than I have ever felt, knowing all I'm about to lose. Her voice emptied of everything but words. Do you know how stupid you are? If you'd have taken her across the state line into Georgia for an ice cream sundae, they could have put you away for a long time. That's how stupid you are. Cora's parents were poor and big with religion and sin and ruin and what all. Justice, I guess. They didn't get much from the life they had to put up with in Florida. But they did get the right to claim justice this time. I don't know how they found out. I don't think Cora told them, not in any direct way. Janie got a good lawyer for me. Spent 10 months in prison and had to register as a sex offender. Good lawyers are expensive. Janie bought my land. I sold my horses. Drove her in Arizona my stallions. Tree my beauty. And Dunstan my friend. I went back on the circuit. Did roping. Some humiliating barrel. It's not the same purse. I did okay, but without a great horse, you're against the odds. And I finally saved up enough to buy Tree back. It was Dunstan I was missing most. I knew he was missing me. Think about Cora a lot. Can't help it. Think about mud and the scotch and the stupidity. Lots of stupidity.
The only painting I ever sold was one I did of my mother. She is standing in the sparse, desolate landscape of winter. The sky is gray with a slight wash of white. She's wearing a long brown coat, a shabby dress coat, a size too large for her. She has slippers on her feet, her back is towards us. She is surrounded by icy hills and mountains. I titled the painting Eskimo Night. I was happy it sold.
Neither my sister or I had many friends growing up, or have many friends now for that matter. In my sister's case, the reasons were obvious. She was extremely timid in public, her eyes rarely left the ground, and she smelled. Not of body odor, but of gasoline. She was in love with cars. She didn't love them the way boys love cars, for their design and mechanics. She loved them the way some girls love horses. She patted them as we walked past them on our way to school. She wiped their windshields and pressed her chest against the front passenger windows and whispered, "Good Whistler," or "Digby," or "Red Fox," or whatever she had named them. In the summer, she would climb on the hood of Panther, a yellow Pontiac, spread her towel, and in her too small blue two-piece, her 10-year-old stomach protruding more than any breast might hope so, she sunbathed. On occasional Saturdays, as other mothers took their daughters to dance classes or tennis lessons, my mother, in a rare gesture of self-satisfied parental attention, drove my sister to the mobile station where she was allowed to work for a few hours. As the cars guzzled their gasoline, my sister's shoes and socks and sweater and blouse cuffs became saturated with what leaked from the pump. My own lack of friendship baffled me. At 12, I bathed religiously and then splashed on Jean Natte cologne, my aromatic bridge to adulthood. I struggled against my own timidity and thought myself as different from my sister as anyone with the same nose and the same dull as sand hair color could be. Yet no one ever said, "Sit here," or "Do you want to be my partner?" or "Let's go ice skating Saturday," to me, though it seemed they often said those things to the person standing next to me. By mid-October of my final year of elementary school, my friendless state left me vulnerable to a wave of new and uncomfortable feelings. Empty branches against a grainy gray sky or the smell of wood made me feel older than I wanted to be. As I walked home from school, the changing afternoon light pulled at something inside me. The 3 o'clock bell made me desperate for someone to say goodbye to, or "I'll call you to." Anything that would lessen the effect of walking home with my car-kissing sister and whiff of gasoline that surrounded her. In our 6th grade classroom, we were multiplying and dividing fractions and putting the letter X in odd places. The more advanced students, I was not one, read Great Expectations. The less adept of us struggled through the sheer boredom of an unabridged version of The Last of the Mohicans. And we studied Central America in social studies. Each Central American country was assigned to groups of 3 or 4 students. I was assigned Nicaragua with Rhonda, Emily, and Nancy. Miss Manning, armed with new theories of education, required that we present our information on the industry, geography, and government of each country in a creative context. She recommended we give our reports while frying bananas on a hot plate or while dancing around a hat. Rhonda decided we should do a skit for our report. She and Emily would be lost tourists and report on the geography. Nancy and I could be Nicaraguans who gave them directions while simultaneously reporting on the industry and government of our country. Rhonda was a short, thin girl with effortless straight blonde hair worn in a simple blunt cut. Never uneven or stringy, Rhonda's hair, like Rhonda herself, seemed to attract and reflect light. Hillside snow on a bright afternoon. Earlier that year, at that dread school lunch hour, when the truths of friendship are revealed and the unwanted few are left like dazed losers in musical chairs, I walked straight to Rhonda's table. That morning in gym, I had made a basket for our team, and she'd said, "Nice shot." I thought it meant she noticed and liked me. "Hi, Rhonda. Can I sit here?" It came out too energetic and eager. Rhonda said nothing. She stared at me while 3 other girls held their breaths and stole glances off each other, their lips tightening. "We're pretty crowded as is. Maybe some other time, okay?" She said finally. As I walked away, I heard someone say, "I don't know, she's so secretive, you know what I mean?" I don't know what she meant or what about me made her say that, though I rather like being thought of as someone with secrets. I just don't know what those secrets could be. My dad was the proverbial traveling salesman at a time when America believed in its own innocence and was easily sold to. He sold paper goods, industrial strength toilet paper and paper towels to large companies, schools, and building complexes. The traveling salesman jokes were just jokes, we believed, and our lives seemed as solid as anyone else's in suburbia. 2 parents, 2 kids, and a Pontiac for a pet. When my dad wasn't on the road, he would sit in the living room armchair, his dark hair and wiry body like a shadow against the puffed pale yellow cushions. The Rochester Times lay across his lap, the headlines unread as his dark eyes traveled past the picture window for glimpses of himself in places more intriguing. At dinner, my father sat at the head of the oval mahogany table in the dining room. My sister and I were across from each other, and my mother, when she did sit, sat next to my sister. Most of the meal, my mother was on her feet, serving, cooking what hadn't been quite done in time, replenishing, clearing, and cleaning as we continued to eat. "Bonnie," my father might call into the kitchen, "there's no cheese on the table. You can't have spaghetti without cheese, right, girls?" My mother would bring a bowl with Parmesan cheese in it and then hurry back to the kitchen to check on the garlic bread. Once, the bowl of Parmesan had no serving spoon. I watched as my sister used her fork to bring heaps of cheese to her spaghetti, most of it spilling through the spaces of the fork. "Jesus, what is she doing?" my father said angrily, enough to bring my mother rushing back. "Oh dear, sorry," said my mother as she wiped the cheese from the table into the cup on her hand. "I forgot a serving spoon." "That's not the point," he said. "These children have no manners. It's disgusting and wasteful. What do you do when I'm not here? Let them eat like pigs?" My mother was silent the rest of the meal, her anger sullen and cold when ignored or unnoticed by my father. After dinner, my father would return to his living room armchair. His newspaper, folded and unread, lay on his lap. His life was apart from us, and we children knew little and cared less about it, just as it seemed he knew little of our lives. His physical presence mattered a great deal, though. It assured a certain order. Our mother woke us at 6:45 and we arrived at school on time. The house was cleaned, our beds were made, and fresh laundry was piled neatly on them when we came home at 3. Dinner was at 7, and we all sat down to it together. And we never had an Eskimo night when my dad was home. Eskimo nights were my mother's invention, though they always ended in the same sad muddle. The power of my mother's imagination never failed to draw my sister and me into its tantalizing premise. The premise of an Eskimo night was that we were to be like little Eskimos, cozily trapped in our igloos, sheltered from the howling winds and sub-freezing temperatures of the desolate Arctic North. "But what fun we could have," my mother would say, her eyes already glazed, munching popcorn and watching TV, playing cards together and having snacks, eating TV dinners on the floor. The reality was that those nights were simply my mother's excuse to hide in the house and eat. My sister and I were then left to fend for ourselves, which usually meant watching television into the late night. My mother's stale farts, the only remnant of her presence. An Eskimo night could last days for my mother. As with all true addicts, my mother believed her own lies. And like the alcoholic who says, "Let's have a party," genuinely believing it will be fun for everyone. There was no hint of ulterior motives or unhappy endings in my mother's invitation to an Eskimo night. She held fast to her hope that in an Eskimo night, there might be, for one brief moment, the filament that would produce the soft glow of family. We would then carry in our hearts through all the ties that break. Thomas Edison tried thousands of different things before he discovered the right filament. My mother tried the same thing 1,000 times. I dutifully began work on my Nicaraguan report a week before it was due. I lay on the floor of my room with my notebook, the encyclopedia, and the travel brochures the teacher recommended we send away for, spread out around me. The world downstairs disappeared as I imagined warm Pacific beaches, lush exotic forests, and an ancient volcano with gusts of sulfurous clouds still rising from their hidden furnaces. I read about extinct civilizations buried under the ground by earthquakes. I pictured happy brown peasants, sometimes naked brown peasant boys, living in a prosperous, non-communist country. The day before our Nicaraguan report was due, Rhonda, Nancy, Emily, and I gathered together at 3 o'clock in front of the school to go over any last-minute changes and remind one another who was bringing which props. Emily suggested rehearsing at Nancy's house, but before that was resolved, we began criticizing the previous reports. "I know," I said in response to Rhonda's mentioning that you couldn't even hear Anita, and I added, "Can you believe Stephen didn't even know how to pronounce Guatemala?" I had struck a chord of common contempt. Encouraged, I continued, "I mean, really," and Louise forgot. Before I could finish, my sister, head bowed and sweater sleeves dangling, came up beside me. Even I noticed the gasoline odor. Had she been Rhonda's sister or even Emily's sister, the others would have laughed at her and been sympathetic to poor Emily or Rhonda. But my sister just reminded them that they didn't like me. The three of them walked away. When we got home, my sister and I knew we were in for an Eskimo night. We entered into the kitchen through the back door and saw the breakfast dishes still on the table. Earlier, they had reflected the chaos of the morning rush as we raced to find or finish homework, dig through piles of clothes for matching socks, and eat without dripping too much on ourselves or our papers. The kitchen sink also warned of an Arctic storm. It was piled high with dishes, slick with mayonnaise, spoons coated with peanut butter or chocolate syrup, and candy wrappers. We heard the scurrying of feet upstairs. Soon we heard water running, then a few moments of silence. Then footsteps coming down the stairs. My mother entered the kitchen. "Oh my," she said, as if surprised to see us, as though we were distant relatives dropping in unexpectedly instead of her children returning from school. She hurriedly cleared the table. That done, she said, "So," and then she sashayed over to kiss us, her rancid breath seeping through the faint odor of toothpaste. Her fresh Paris Nights lipstick branded my sister with a dark red stain above her left eye. My mother was 34. Her face, not delicate but thin, looked drawn and tired despite the fresh makeup. The shape of her body seemed to change with what she wore, though I never thought of her as fat. Her hair was Monroe blonde, with an ever-widening line of dark roots. She never brushed her hair on Eskimo nights, but with nervous energy would pull it and push it towards her face with her fingers. As my mother stepped back from kissing us, her eyes seemed particularly small and unfocused, but her lipstick and blue eyeshadow begged us to believe with her that the past 6 hours had been just a minor lapse of good judgment. We might have believed if only her fingers would be still. Thoroughbreds at the gate, those long, delicate, perfectly manicured fingers could not be contained. They rolled over any object with their grasp. They tapped on counters. They clawed and drummed the air. They had been the only true functioning part of my mother that morning, unwrapping candy bars, whipping ice cream into a cold, soupy drink, spreading mayonnaise on toast, all with a frenzied energy that could not easily be checked. "You doll faces must be hungry," she said about making us sundaes, throwing the used utensils into the sink, leaving the syrup and banana peels on the counter, her fingers in constant motion. She ate nothing as she served us our snack. She stood by the sink as we ate, her fingers puffing and pulling at her hair. She never looked directly at us as she asked the usual questions, not registering any of our answers. "How was school today?" "I failed my spelling test. You need to sign it." "Oh, did you go on that field trip to the botanical garden?" 2 months ago, Mom." "Oh, was it nice?" All through my mother's attempts at conversation, my sister, chocolate syrup dripping from her chin to her shirt, babbled nonsensically under her breath, imitating Donald Duck. The ice cream sundae sprayed from her mouth, and I shoved her shoulder in disgust. My sister's public timidity was, I'm sure, based on the worry that if she relaxed for even a moment, her true angry and spiteful self would be revealed. She pushed me back hard enough to put me off balance. My head knocked the table leg as I went over my chair. Squealing with the thrill of assault and fear of retribution, my sister ran to my mother and buried her syrupy face into my mother's belly. In her clean, one-size-fit-all house coat and fresh makeup, my mother had tried to hide her bloated stomach. Now all pretense began to crumble. Her nails dug into the flesh of my sister's upper arm, and she pushed my sister from her body. My sister wailed, and I was thwarted in any hope of extracting my own brand of revenge. My mother became panicked and apologetic. But she saw her opening. My mother, convinced as always of the curative power of an Eskimo night, said, "Oh, my babies." And she drew my sister back to her. "Oh, sweeties, we all need to just relax. We need to do something fun this afternoon. I'm thinking," she paused for effect, "Eskimo night." I started to say to her that I needed to do homework, and my sister looked at me, her mouth open. It was as if she heard thin ice cracking under her foot. Eskimo nights were not really optional. My mother was calm. "Oh, sweetie, we can't have Eskimo night without you. It's been months since we've had a fun time, just the three of us. I'll write a note to your teacher. Sometimes being with your family is more important than doing other things." My sister and I went off to change into our nightgowns. "Oh, God, we haven't had fun like this in a long time," my mother's voice trailed after us. "Why do we always have to wear nightgowns?" my sister asked me. "I don't know," was all I wanted to answer. "Are we supposed to pretend we're sick? It always makes me feel like I'm sick." "You are sick," I said, and shut the door to my room. of all the illicit behaviors involved in Eskimo nights. Overeating, staying up late, not doing homework, wearing nightgowns in the afternoon felt the most deviant to me. When I returned to the living room, my sister was snuggling into my mother on the "This is so cozy," my mother said, and she put her arms around my sister and bent her head towards my sister's face. "Oh gosh, you need a bath, don't you?" My sister grunted her displeasure. "Well, maybe we'll get up early and have one in the morning. But sweetie, could you move? I need some room." "Well, what shall we three do while we wait for the Chinese food?" "Bingo!" my sister said. "That's a good idea. Maybe we can have a game a little later. Let's just see if there's anything on TV now." She picked up the television section of the paper. My mother was thrilled. The Lady Vanishes was scheduled to start soon. We turned the TV on in anticipation. "Oh, girls, this is perfect. It's a great movie. You kids will love it." It was British and black and white. My sister and I, confused and losing interest, turned to the popcorn. My mother dipped her hands into the popcorn bowl as if trying to cool burning fingers. Often she stirred the popcorn around or took a few kernels out. These she rolled around or pulled apart with her fingers. She didn't eat any at first. But by the time the Chinese food arrived, she had the popcorn bowl on her lap and was trying to chew the unpopped seeds. Afternoon turned into night. The movie ended, other shows played, and my sister and I ate until our faces glistened with grease and our bellies were stretched to the point of pain. My mother never stopped eating. Her breathing became louder and quicker. Her eyelids were puffy and heavy. All the while, her fingers worked like efficient pinchers, and her mouth kept a steady rhythm. Late into the night, she finally said, "Oh, girls, I need to lay down for a bit." Without explanation, she put any cartons that still had food in them on a plate and took them to her bedroom. We heard her door shut. My sister lay crumbled in a heap on the floral sheet, her pudgy body like a pile of dirty laundry, her right arm stretched overhead, her fingers draped over the edge of a plate. As her eyes were closing, her mouth, a small moon, emitted quiet breathing grunts. The television's light set her aglow. A pretty woman sang, "Chock full of nuts is the heavenly coffee," and my sister drifted to sleep. The next morning, my mother woke us late. In her now wrinkled one-size-fit-all, her face puffed and red, she looked utterly confused and somewhat put out. I imagine her thinking, "Why do they keep sending another day? I told them to put a hold on my order, but every morning it's just here. I just can't keep up." "Just get your clothes on, girls. There's no time for breakfast. I'll bring some bread in the car. Hurry, it's really late. We'll go to bed early tonight." I forgot the sombrero I was going to wear for my knowledgeable about government Nicaraguan peasant. When the tourists came to ask me, a sleeping peasant, for directions, I surprised them and myself by answering in my version of a Spanish accent. The class was hysterical with laughter. Never before or since have I been so funny. I even managed to include the required 6 facts about the government without losing a laugh. Despite my exceptional performance in social studies, later that day I received a demerit for not having done my science homework. It was my 3rd demerit for homework. I brought a note home informing my mother I would be sent to detention the next afternoon. My mother, her face now chalky and her fingers shaking with exhaustion, was devastated and apologetic. She tried to assure me that she could still write a note and save me from detention. I had not done detention that year, and I secretly looked forward to it. It was the closest I had come to being included in an after-school activity. Detention was held in the remedial reading room, which was similar to a regular classroom but smaller. And there were 2 chairs to every desk. The desks filled up in an orderly fashion as students from different grades staggered into the room. Kevin, also a 6th grader, his thin, blondish hair sticking out above his forehead in a stiff salute, arrived at the door of detention the same time I did. Rhonda, who had written the answers to the math test on her wrist and was caught when she raised her hand to answer a question during English, was alone at a table. I may have been unpopular, but Kevin was a boy. Rhonda psst at me and waved me to the seat next to her. I had no illusions what purpose I served for Rhonda, but that in no way diminished the rush of excitement I felt at having been invited to join her. Oh, God, I was afraid Kevin was just going to sit here. Excuse me while I gag, just thinking about it. Yeah, I answered. Then there was silence. There seemed to be nothing more to say. I expected Rhonda to turn away from me, open her books, and start her homework, but she didn't. You were really funny in social studies. Thanks. You sounded just like the mouse on Ed Sullivan. You know, Topo Gigio. He's so cute, isn't he? Yeah, except he's Italian. It would have been better if I sounded like that Mexican guy, Jose Jimenez. Oh, well, it was probably funnier, sounding Italian. Kiss me. I don't think that Mexican guy is so funny anyway. The teacher gave us a sharp look. It seemed to delight Rhonda. She pulled her mouth into an exaggerated frown. Then she, with a conspiratorial glint in her eye, she looked at me and smiled. We continued our conversation with notes, whispers, and muffled giggles. Rhonda loved television as much as my mother did. She recounted favorite programs, mostly Ed Sullivan shows. I usually limited my written responses to yeah, or I didn't see it, but Rhonda could make me laugh. It turned out she had as cynical an eye as I did, but she had the wit to make use of it. Cynicism without wit is a depressing topic. The next day, inspired by Rhonda's television savvy, I joined my mother on the couch. I began to appreciate her ability to give herself over to the television, to relinquish expectations of the programs, of herself. I saw in my mother what I thought of as patience and trust. Watching television for me was not that easy. I often felt confused and frustrated, unsure how I was supposed to react to situations that seemed preposterous and behavior that was careless and stupid. But I watched nonetheless, and it became the thread of my friendship with Rhonda. A few weeks into my television regimen, the day came when the people standing next to me were making plans to go to the movies on Saturday. Rhonda asked if I wanted to come. I tried to sound nonchalant and said, well, okay. We were to meet at the movie theater where the 10 Commandments was playing, then go a few blocks away to a new cafeteria-style restaurant. My face ached from happiness. No one had tried to time her entrance into the row of seats in order to avoid sitting next to me. When Nancy came back from the concession stand, she passed out candies to everyone, including me. Emily offered me a sip of her Coke when I started to get up to a drink for myself. By the time the movie was over, the afternoon had turned crisp. We ran to the restaurant without putting our coats on, shivering and giggling with pre-adolescent smugness. The restaurant was fairly crowded. Since cafeteria style was still new to this neighborhood, we spotted an empty table near a window in the back. We hurriedly threw our coats, gloves, and hats, if we had them, over the chairs and made our way through the line. There was an enormous variety of food. The choices made it hard for us to limit ourselves. We all tried to outdo each other, piling our trays with pudding and banana cream pie and brownies and strawberries with whipped cream. When we reached the cashier, and we didn't have enough money to pay for it all, quickly and carelessly, often purposely, bumping into one another, we put most of the food back. Our trays finally matched our money supply. Nancy and I had already began to eat when Rhonda and Emily, leaning over trays held midriff high, came scurrying over. In an excited whisper, they said, "Look at that woman in the brown coat." We had to look over our shoulders to see her, but there she was, her one-size-fits-all, peeking out from under a shapeless brown overcoat, her face pasty pale without makeup and her platinum hair unbrushed, black roots exposed under the cafeteria lights. It seemed that she had appeared out of thin air. How else could I have not seen her when I first came in? Her tray was full of plates, some already empty. She was hunched over, her face not more like 3 inches from the table. She looked like a giant brown cockroach, her delicate fingers, antenna-like, busily picking at her food. "Oh, gross," the girls said in unison. "Now, girls," Rhonda began, and holding our attention, stared at my mother. Adding pity to the disdain she held for all adults, she continued, "That could be us if we hadn't had to put all our food back." "Very funny," answered Emily. "Not in my worst nightmare would I eat like that." I heard those words, but it was as if they had to travel a great distance to reach me. I was frozen still, and yet at the same time I was convinced my body was visibly trembling. For what seemed like a long time, I kept my eyes on the salt shaker. A few particles of white salt lay precariously balanced on the top of the shaker, just outside the holes. Finally, I was able to say out loud that I had to go to the bathroom. I stayed in the bathroom. I put the toilet seat cover down and sat staring at the pink cupids on the wall. Eventually, a customer knocked and I had to leave. As I returned to my seat, I saw my mother leaving the restaurant. A bag with a doggy's tails painted on it in one hand and a cookie was in the other. Her departure did not go unnoticed by Nancy. The comments began anew. I knew I was obligated to say something. Following Emily's, "What a cow," I added, "Yeah, really, what a cow." After I said those words, my breath stopped for a moment. It wasn't that I'd call my mother a name. In a few years, I would call her worse names to her face. It was that at that moment, I realized I would have said or done anything to hold on to that spider web thin thread of acceptance. Soon, the other mothers with heavy perfume and clicking heels came to pick up their daughters. Each one offered to drive me home. I explained that my own mother was on her way. When I was sure everyone was gone and wouldn't return to search for a dropped glove or missing ring, I walked to the bus stop. The late afternoon sky was beginning to darken. The air was cold and I shivered as I waited for the bus. I had found out my secrets and they were kept hidden this time. Now the day was over. In this gloaming hour, I saw the evening stars, which I knew was really the planet Venus, and I was going home to what now felt like safety. As the bus rode through the neighborhood, it passed the mobile station where my sister liked to spend time. I envied my sister, her cars. I envied the way she could caress them and share her secrets safely, sunbathing on their hoods. I leaned back to my seat and stared out the window. I thought of Eskimos, real Eskimos. I wondered if they got into pajamas at night, and if they did, where did they change in a one-room igloo? I wondered if Eskimos living in an igloo could ever really get warm. The bus rattled through streets with houses on both sides. I watched as one by one kitchen lights were being turned on. Soft, yellow lights.
I have been saying fuck to my children a lot lately. Not out loud, not usually. But in my mind, under my breath, I hear myself saying, because it's too fucking expensive, that's why. You don't fucking talk to me like that. Get it the fuck yourself. My children are 7, 12, and 14, all boys. I imagine soon they'll be doing the same to me if they're not already. Whispering inaudible fucks. I listen for it sometimes. I walk past my oldest, James, so close I am aware of the scent of his oily skin and scalp. But all that rides out on his breath is the smell of Doritos. I'm not surprised. I don't really expect him to let loose with that kind of language, not even timidly, under his breath. He seems too lost and confused, too passive to focus his anger, too depressed. Nor do I really expect it from my middle son, Jeremy, who just seems too happy to harbor unspoken fucks. Why do families do that? Name their children with the same letter? I guess we thought we were uniting ourselves, creating children who wouldn't disappear from each other in the endless sea of other school children. But in fact, it only seems to confuse people as to who's who. And as I get older, it trips up my brain. And when trying to reprimand, I struggle to pronounce the right name, so my anger escalates as I stutteringly yell, Jason! He is the one. He matches my anger breath for breath, unspoken words filling the air, clouding the space between us. He's only 7. There are times when the softness of an earlier age, his 4-year-old self, for example, shows on his face. It might be in his eyes as they widen to some startling revelation. Mom, did you know the oven stays warm even after you turn it off? Or around his lips as he still calls spaghetti, spaghetti, or forehead, forthead. It is in those moments that I feel not just the ache for that smaller body, which folded easily into my chest and shoulder, hanging with just enough weight to make me feel strong and capable, but I feel a rush of love for his now 7-year-old self and the relief of hopefulness. We haven't gone too far. From this distance, that small boy is still visible. I reach out to touch him, to bring him close, to smell the fresh boyness in him before his glands take over. But he pulls away. I want to touch my children. I can't touch Jeremy, the middle one, because he's never home. He spends most of his time at his best friend's house. It is probably the secret of his happiness. At his 10th birthday, his friend's mother wrote on his birthday card, "To my adopted son." It didn't disturb me. In fact, I felt a sense of pride and satisfaction, as if I'd gotten him into a good school. He was well placed, and I took credit for it. I'm afraid to touch James, my oldest, afraid to do anything that might somehow add to his disappointment in me, or himself, or love. The boy's father and I are divorcing. My arms feel empty around my children, and I find myself thinking more and more of getting a dog. I imagine my hand nuzzled with reverence as I walk from room to room, picking up dirty underwear or plates with old food caked on them. I imagine a life of order and obedience, an unwavering schedule of sunrise walks with a dog that would heel and come faithfully every day of his life. In fact, from the moment I understood what "the marriage is not working" meant, the euphemism initially confused me. I mean, was my husband saying it was unplugged or broken? Ever since then, the idea of owning a large, devoted dog has helped me sleep for a few hours at night. I did not mention the prospect of a dog to the boys then. It wasn't the right time. I had a dog for a few months when I was 9 years old. It was a small terrier mix with shaggy hair, a stray that walked up to me with all the implied mystical destiny of a Hollywood movie, or so it seemed to me. My family was not well off, however, and a dog seemed an unnecessary luxury. The spring weather of Poughkeepsie, New York, allowed us to let the dog hang around our unfenced yard. I fed the dog constantly and secretly. I did my homework on the stoop to our house, and I sneaked him into my bed at night for a few hours. I buried my face in his neck and inhaled a warm, musky, soothing aroma. Threads of his hair touching my face wove a soft veil of comfort. And the dog learned tricks, a trick. He sat when I said sit. I was the third youngest daughter in a family with 4 children, yet the dog sat when I said sit. That he rarely sat for my sisters and younger brother meant more to me than my good grades at school. This partiality surely marked his doom. My sister, overzealous and impatient, tried to force him to sit, and he snapped at her. A few days later, when I came home from school, my mother told me that the dog had run off to find his real family. Painful as it was, I believed her, until my father, never one to credit dogs with much intelligence, told me later that day that the dog's real family came and got him. My dog did not betray me. My family did. Somehow, this made more sense to me even then. Quickly, too quickly, the divorce becomes final. The boys have returned from their first official summer visitation with their father, like bedraggled Confederate soldiers coming to grips with the fact that the war is over, they lost, and there is nothing to come back to. It is 2 weeks before school starts, and in this searing Florida heat, there is only Cartoon Network to distract the boys from the empty, sickly feeling of homesickness. We are all homesick. What had been home seems to be moving further from our reach each time the light and heat of day takes us from our dreams. I try to make plans to go to a museum or a park or some advertised event, but we always wake late and petty distractions or disagreements hold us to the house. In truth, we are afraid to leave, frightened of how adrift we might feel, afraid that being among other people would only deepen our disappointment in ourselves. Our house and Cartoon Network seem like needed shelter. I am convinced a dog would only enhance our sense of shelter. Even as exciting an event as going to the animal shelter to pick a puppy doesn't rally us enough to leave the house until late in the afternoon, dangerously close to the 4:00 closing time. For some reason, the only animal shelter the operator could find was the county shelter in Brandon, a 40-minute drive from Tampa. We arrive, after driving past it 3 times, at 10 minutes to 4. After arguing about the definition of closing time, the woman at the front desk, a heavy-set, earnest volunteer, goes to the back offices to find a higher authority. I suspect she is just seeking a place to hide for 10 minutes. James, the sad one, sits on a padded metal chair, his arms folded across his chest, his head hanging from his shoulders. He sighs a couple of times and occasionally closes his eyes for a few seconds. Jeremy, the happy one, contents himself with the copies of old dog fancy magazines that lie on a low table in the center of the waiting area. Jason, the angry one, with obvious control, is kicking things. The legs of the table, the soda machine, the chair his brother sits on. Finally, with full intention to miss, he kicks dangerously close to my shins. "You lied," he says. "You said we were going to get a dog today. You didn't even know how to get here. You never do what you say you're going to do. You always mess things up for us." I know he and the others believe I am the cause of the divorce. My husband, Jonathan, never apologized for anything, whereas I was always saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I forgot to wash your black jeans for today. I'm sorry I thought you wanted the tuna fish. I'm sorry you didn't get picked to be on Henry's team. Of course, to them, the one who apologizes is the guilty one. Jason kicks the table again, this time knocking over a half-filled can of soda that someone had left there. Damn it, I say, looking for some way to clean up the mess, finally throwing a dog fancy magazine over the puddle. You made us late, not me. You had to watch TV after I asked you 100 times to get ready. You couldn't find your shoes because you never put them away. You just do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter what anyone else wants. And thinking of his dad, I add, you fucking brat, silently in my mind. When the soda can had begun its downward tilt, even as my frustration was turning to rage, there was a quiver of a second in which I enjoyed watching Jason's eyes shift from a horizontal anger to a vertical, uh-oh. Now I feel only despair as I watch them fill with hate. Tears stream down his face, but there is no sadness in his expression. He looks at me with a hard, steady glare. His voice is low and clear and rapid. I was in the car before you. I look at him and think, if you can't be happy like Jeremy, why can't you be silent and sullen like James, sitting on some chair knowing things won't work out? That way I could feel sorry for you or ignore you as I choose. Surprisingly, the woman returns. Her pudgy face softens when she sees Jason's tears. It's all right, young man. Mrs. Donovan said you could look around, but only for a short time. We light up, as if we've been showered with fairy dust, the fairy dust of expectation. As we walk through the doors that lead to the kennel, we are all imagining ourselves playing fetch, but with different dogs. One by one, we each take our dogs to the play area and try to convince the others why this dog is the one we all should want. Only I am enthusiastic about the large, black, part Rottweiler, part Shepherd male that promises to grow into a sleek, sexy, sinewy 100-pound dog. A dog that would escort me as I did late-night grocery shopping, or would wait non-judgmentally in the car if I ventured into bars at night. Under pressure, Jeremy abandons a small spaniel mix, probably an ex-lover of his from the Victorian era, and he petitions with James for the fluffy poodle mix. By 4:20, Jason and James are still with their puppies. Jeremy has left James and his poodle and has gone off to look at the kittens. I am still convinced that only a large dog could quiet my heart and calm my stomach, both of which feel as if they are being continually twisted like wrung rags. Guys, I really was thinking for lots of reasons a big dog is a better choice. Why? James says. Because they're better watchdogs. You don't know that, he counters. Well, even if they're not, they look scarier. You said lots of reasons. What's another? A big dog is more sedate. You don't know that. This time it is Jason speaking. You don't even know what sedate means, I murmur inaudibly. Jason knows he is no match for my power or Jason's passion. He wilts under my pleading, his final words on the matter being, "Oh, fine." I don't think about how his heart feels as he walks away from his puppy's cage, the dog's expectant eyes steadfast on James' back. I think instead, James knows I love him, and that will carry him through all life's hard and disappointing moments. Jason doesn't know I love him. I have often promised James and Jeremy and Jason that a mother always loves her children, even when she's angry with them. But in truth, I haven't always loved Jason. There have been times I've even hated him. I want to give Jason something he could love and that would love him. I want it to be evidence of my love. We get Jason's dog. That's what I call the blonde Chihuahua mix, Jason's dog. I had meant for us to get a family dog, but each of us has too strongly aligned ourselves with a particular puppy. I thank James profusely for being understanding. I promised Jeremy a kitten for his next birthday, and I believe Jason's promise of responsibility. The puppy snuggles close on Jason's lap as we drive back home. She seems a calm puppy, and Jason is happy. For the first time since Jonathan walked out the door with his prized Gucci suitcase and practiced expression of remorse, I feel a wave of comfort wash over me. If I manage not to look in the rearview mirror and not catch James's hurt and sullen shape bent up against the passenger window, I can hold on to that sensation. For the first week of puppy ownership, we are all enthralled. Her accidents are mere dribbles and easily cleaned by me. Her teeth are tiny and harmless. She sleeps often, sweetly cuddled into one of the children. Our spirits lighten. James adopts the puppy as if she had been his first choice. But even more important, Jason hugs me many times that week. His arms tighten around my waist. I make a puppy feeding chart for Jason, and he feels proud of himself. For the first week, maybe 2 weeks. Too soon, though, the puppy ceases to be fascinating to everyone but me. Feeding him becomes harder and harder for Jason to remember. In a minute, after this cartoon, you always yell at me. I don't want this to become another issue between us. I just take over the care of the puppy, happily. She grows. By the time she is 6 months old, she weighs nearly 40 pounds, and we no longer think she has any chihuahua. Her coat, a tawny wheat color, is short and coarse, and her teeth are no longer harmless. As the boys watch television, I am often in the background, sprawled on the floor, my arms around the dog, my face buried into her neck. I'm sure it is a disconcerting sight, a 42-year-old woman cooing and sniffing into a dog's fur, trying to find again the comfort of that musky aroma. When the boys do glance over, my sheepish grin confirms the awkwardness of the scene. Jason's indifference, and the others as well, turns to resentment. The dog, named Jedi by Jason, is now seen as another sibling, someone else I favor over him. He is constantly telling on Jedi. She tracked mud on the rug. She ate my X-Man comic book. She chewed my bike tire. As of late, she pees on the oriental rug. If glasses of milk are left on the coffee table, she spills and breaks them. The picture window in the den is scratched deeply. The leg of the mahogany dining room table is scarred with teeth marks. Pillows are eaten. Often I blame the boys, usually James, because he's the oldest, and because he would give me the least resistance. Why weren't you watching? You know not to leave the food out. Couldn't you see the dog needed to pee? The sense of chaos seems endemic. I feel anxious and angry and addicted to sniffing the dog as she sleeps. Finally, in a rage, I announce, untruthfully, I wasn't the one who wanted a dog in the first place. No one bothers to correct me. I continue. We got the dog you wanted, Jason, and now you don't do anything to take care of her. I'm taking the dog to obedience school, and you're going with her. He doesn't protest. The obedience school is at a local Y, in a room that is also used for toddler gymnastics. Plastic climbing structures and rubber mats are pushed to the corners of the room. Large yellow and red beanbags line the side walls. Along the back wall are metal folding chairs, open and waiting. Jason and I are the first to arrive. The trainer, a man about 35, muscled with shaggy blonde hair, greets us with a quick, "Hello, I'm Bob King." Then he goes down to his knees and rubs Jedi's ears. His face lights up. "Who have we got here? Yes, you are a handsome dog, aren't you?" I am beaming with pride, thinking this man of experience sees in Jedi the potential of a lassie. Her name is Jedi. She's my son's dog. I add that information so that I will not be held accountable for the dog's present behavior. But Bob King's attention is already on another arriving dog. Take a seat, he says, and repeats his greeting exactly to the next dog. The role of ownership now occurs to Jason, and he wants to be the one holding the dog's leash. I'm not sure he can control the dog in this situation, but I feel obligated to hand the leash over to him. The next 10 minutes are a whirl of straining, choking dogs, jumping on each other and whoever walks close to them. I sit in one of the chairs against the wall and watch. He follows Jedi around the room as she ecstatically greets her long-lost cousins, thinking we have arranged a fabulous doggy surprise party for her. Jason is caught up in the excitement as well, petting anything that will hold still long enough to be touched. Jedi's eyes take on a shark-like quality, as if there is no one home in her brain. The corners of her mouth extend to her floppy ears in a grin. Bob King insists everyone get control of their dogs and sit down. Jason, with all his strength, pulls Jedi across the linoleum floor. As her rump slides along the floor, Jedi continues grinning. Most of the dogs have settled down in the time it takes Jason to drag Jedi to our seats. Bob King begins talking. Jason sits and tells me he's bored, then lets the leash drop. Jedi races down the line of dogs, stopping at a spindly, all-legs Irish setter puppy. The setter prances in place. I apologize to the owner, the most together-looking man in this varied group. He's very gracious. When I return to my spot, Jason is stretched out across both seats, and I imagine Bob King is putting us in the should never own a dog category. Dogs are very social animals, Bob King says, but their society has a strict code of hierarchy. It is made up of alpha and sub-alpha and then beta and sub-beta dogs. These traits are inborn and dogs know their place. I am wondering if beta dogs are ever envious of the power of alpha dogs, or if they just hang out with sub-beta dogs in order to feel good about themselves. As Bob King goes on, it is clear that the beta dogs in fact seek out the alpha dogs. They look for leadership. I think of my marriage. I look at Jason. His young 7-year-old face is serious and attentive. I don't know how much of this he takes in, but I am sure he is feeling his father's absence. To your pet, you are all the alpha dog, and they long for you to take control. It is my job to help you do that. And Bob King smiles. I'm attracted to him because he likes dogs, because he is not an unattractive man, and because, at least in this situation, he is clearly the alpha dog. I realize how deep my betaism runs. The class goes quickly. We practice sit, down, and stay. Any successful command thrills me, making me feel I have a power that transcends species. Jason remains on the chairs, saying he is too tired, but he's watching the class with interest. There are 7 dogs in the class, and the range of ability to pay attention varies greatly, the Irish setter being the most distracted of all the dogs. His owner is patient and calm, making the rest of us seem humorless and self-serious. It is a cold Tampa evening when the class is over. The trees are blowing, and it feels as if rain is coming, though it's hard for me to tell because the sky is already dark at this hour. I like rainy nights. Nobody leaves you on a rainy night. Jason and I see a bolt of lightning. I imagine a seam in the universe is being ripped, revealing a hidden sky of blinding white energy that we glimpse only for a second. I say to Jason, did you know that Tampa has more lightning than any other place in America? You told me 100 times, Mom. I guess I think it's kind of exciting. So, what did you think of obedience school? He shrugs his shoulders. How do you think Jedi did? I ask. I don't think Jedi thinks you can control her. A surprisingly soft roll of thunder follows his remark. I thought we did pretty well. What about that setter? That puppy seemed pretty out of control. What dog? They all sat. The red, long-haired dog is called an Irish setter. I know, he answers quickly, then adds quietly, You said sitter. Well, I meant to say setter. He was pretty wild. Maybe it was a girl. Maybe. Do you remember its name, I ask? Happy. That's right. Very good. I forgot. That's a fun name. It was a happy dog, wasn't it? That's because it didn't get yelled at all the time like Jedi, Jason says. Large, slow drops of rain plunk against the windshield. What do you mean? I didn't yell at Jedi. Yes, you did. I don't think I was yelling at Jedi. Yes, you were. I mean, sometimes maybe I said things in a strong voice, but she has to understand I'm in charge, and it's not time to play around. I wasn't yelling. Give me a fucking break. We watch the rain gain force, pounding the windshield. The next Saturday, after I take the dog on her sunrise walk, my ex-husband, calls. He has an emergency at the hospital. He's an internist and won't be able to take the boys until this evening. The conversation is quick and emphatic. I want him to ask, Is that okay for you? I want him to say, How have you been? Are you all right? I want to hear his voice just a few seconds longer. I tell the boys. James, my hound, just shrugs his shoulders and nods. Jeremy, my spaniel, asks if he can play at his friend's house, and Jason, the terrier, slams the door to his room. Later, as I'm clearing the breakfast plates, I try to think of something I might be able to do with James and Jason that afternoon. I look out the kitchen window and see Jason trying to teach Jedi to stay. I'm pleased and self-congratulatory. But soon I hear the anger and frustration in his voice. No, stay, no, I said to stay, no, you stay, you fucking dog. I look out again and see that Jason is about to hit Jedi. Jason, I shout, stop it. He sees me staring out at him. He starts running toward the gate. I put Jedi in the house and run after him. He is halfway down the block by the time I reach him. I'm about to yell at him, don't you ever... But as I turn his body to face mine, I don't recognize him. His face is twisted in sadness and rage. He looks like a little old man, Rumpelstiltskin, the moment he has to give up the child. As if Jason is aware that his face is revealing more than he intends to, he raises his hands to cover it. Let's go home, I say gently. I put my arm around his shoulder. He keeps his hands on his face, and we start to walk back. We get only a few feet before he just sinks from my fingers and is lying on the sidewalk. Little sobs float from his body. Come on, Jason, get up. His sobs grow deeper and start to come so fast I think he can't breathe. His body shakes. I go down to him and cradle him in my arms. We rock. A simple motion of forgotten comfort. He turns his body in my arms, hugging my neck, nestling his face on my chest. His tears are a strange flow of warm, then cold on my skin. His sobs gradually slow, and he moans a continual, I can't. You can't what, sweetheart? He just repeats, I can't. I know, my sweet baby. Like the seam of the sky opening in these few moments, I believe I see inside Jason. I don't know what to say to him. What part of this universe can he control? Not who he was born, not the family he was born to, not the thoughts that scare him at night, not the emotions that spring full-blown and uninvited, not the dreams that tear him from sleep. not the strange moments of sheer fate that rush at anyone. But I tell him, you know, a lot of children your age think that they are all powerful, that they can make things happen, they can cause good things and bad things. But you know better. You know a secret that it takes most people a long time to figure out. You are very strong and brave to know this secret, to not be afraid of things you can't control. And you will learn what's important and what thoughts and feelings to ignore. You will learn how to choose the things you want to do. I believe it was the right thing to say.